This is week 13 of college baseball rankings. Let's jump into it with that number one spot, still Wake Forest, and it seems like they have just solidified it even more over the past week with LSU dropping another series and this time to an even worse opponent. So, Wake Forest by far the number one team now, and yeah, they'll probably be able to ride that out for the rest of the season until postseason starts.
Yeah, I think it would take a lot to get Wake Forest out of that number one spot at this point. Even if they lose this final series of the season, I don't think they're dropping out. And yeah, just completely dominated this year. Pitching staff is unreal. Clearly the most dominant in the country, and yeah, just look like the best team in the country by a long shot at this point now.
Definitely something that they'll be able to rely on during the postseason is that pitching staff when it really becomes nitty gritty. And then at number two, we have a new team jumping in with Arkansas jumping into that spot where LSU was sitting. They have just consistently been able to put up good weeks recently, and yeah, just took the series over what was number seven South Carolina.
Yeah, Arkansas just continues to impress this year, even dealing with injuries. And this is a good series win over a South Carolina team that really needed this series after losing back to back weekends. I thought South Carolina played decently well. It was a pretty close series, but I thought this was one they might be able to take after really needing it. But impressive for Arkansas to once again come out on top like they have most of this year.
Yeah, in South Carolina now three straight series losses after that, so they'll be dropping a decent amount this week, even though it has been against pretty tough competition in the SEC. But now at that number three spot where we had Arkansas last week, we have Stanford jumping up one. They had a good week, went 3-1, and yeah, won the series versus Arizona. So kind of what you expect there, and they clinched the conference title now. So really nothing to play for this final week, but definitely yeah, able to dominate the entire conference for most of the year.
Yeah, pretty impressive to be able to clinch the conference before heading into the final weekend, especially with how that conference was looking halfway through conference play. It was looking like they could have a tight battle with a couple teams there in contention, but they've really just pulled away on this back half stretch, and they're finally looking like that team that we thought they could be and living up to the talent they have on that roster.
For sure. And in that four spot, jumping over LSU, who we have at five, is Florida, who had another super impressive week, sweeping Vandy, even though, they were at home. So that's kind of what we've seen recently in the SEC is just teams at home dominating and then on the road kind of struggling there. But being able to get a sweep there and winning most of those games by a decent margin just definitely deserve to jump up, and this is kind of the only spot that was available for them, and then LSU right behind them after kind of struggling recently in their pitching staff really falling apart. Besides Paul Skeens, there it's a lot of question marks going into the postseason, which is really the worst time where you want to be struggling.
Yeah, I think there's been some question marks with Florida's pitching staff throughout some points in the season, but this weekend they really put it together. And Jack Caglione, especially on Sunday, going over 7 innings. And yeah, they just completely manhandled Vandy this weekend. And yeah, just look like the class of the SEC East as they take the lead in that side.
Yep, for sure. And then after LSU at five, we brought up West Virginia from that nine spot last week, and they just continue to pass tests this week. Was versus number 20 Texas Tech, and yeah, just need one more win to guarantee the conference. So they have just kind of set themselves apart from the rest of the conference there.
Yeah, not a team we expected to be in this position when the year started, but there's just a few teams in our rankings like Duke up until this past week and Clemson as well that have just really flew up the rankings the last couple weeks and have been super impressive, and West Virginia being one of those teams, and it's going to be cool to see them host a regional most likely.
Yeah, those teams are both top 10 teams, but right after West Virginia, we have Campbell at seven, who kind of just followed right behind West Virginia, going up the same amount of spots. And yeah, they had a good week, and just the opportunity was there for them to jump a few teams in the top 10, all of them pretty much being SEC there. So yeah, they had a good week against decent competition where, yeah, we went 3-1. So the ability for them to jump up was there, and they were able to capitalize.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, just 3 in 1 week against some decent competition and just able to take advantage of some other teams slipping down a bit.
Yep, for sure. And then in that 8 spot, we have Vanderbilt falling from 6. They went 1-3. They won their midweek against Louisville, who is now a team that really shouldn't be considered in the postseason consideration, and then got swept, obviously, by Florida, like we mentioned earlier. Would have considered it a decent week if they went 2-2, but yeah, losing that series to Florida, getting swept there is pretty brutal. But yeah, it's been a tough stretch for them, losing 3 of the past 4 weekends. So they could definitely drop further if they can't find that consistency somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think earlier in the year we kind of saw the offensive struggles with Vandy, and there was some question marks on that side of things, and seems like those are kind of popping up again right now. It could just be a bad weekend against Florida, but it's one of those things that's a little worrisome heading into postseason. You would hope they would get things clicking in this last week in conference tournament beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. And just like we mentioned earlier, in that 9 spot, we have a huge rise from Clemson, who we had at 18 last week, but we said that if they were able to continue to pull off this impressive run, that they would be jumping up a lot. And here they are in that 9 spot after a few teams struggled a bit, but a lot of the teams from like 10 to 20 did pretty well, but feel like at this point Clemson is definitely proven themselves as one of the best teams in the nation, so they deserve to be in a top 10 spot. And yeah, they went 4-0 midweek at Coastal Carolina, won that, and then went to Virginia Tech and swept the series. So just an insanely impressive week against really high quality competition, and to be able to go 4-0 there is just really impressive and showing their quality all around.
Yeah, they've won 13 of their last 14. I think it's 8 straight now. So they're really solidifying themselves as a regional host and probably a national seed as well. So it was about time that the our rankings reflected that, and that's why you see a big jump from them here.
Yeah, and then following them at 10 is Duke. We had them 8 last week, but they struggled a bit, went 2-3, 1-1 in the midweek, and then lost the series versus Georgia Tech. So unfortunately, a pretty tough week there, but it was their first bad week in a while, so felt like we shouldn't drop them too far after the consistency that they've been able to show for a lot of the season coming up to this point. So yeah, it was decent competition throughout the entire week as well. So not terrible week for them.
Yeah, I think they had won 4 series in a row previous to this, so it's just hard to win that many series in a row, and not going to knock them down for just one slip up after being on an absolute hot streak. Don't think there's a lot of question marks necessarily unless the struggles continue.
Yep, definitely. And then outside the top 10, in the 11 spot, we have Coastal Carolina. Went 3-1, lost to Clemson midweek, and then swept South Alabama. So good weekend, sweep, but would have loved to see getting a win midweek against Clemson, or at least being a little bit more competitive. It seems like those midweek games have kind of gotten away from them recently against the better competition there, and sitting at 33-17 is kind of surprising for a team that has been pretty consistent most of the year and definitely like right outside the top 10 here, but definitely a little bit concerning with that record, but has shown that they have the quality to win against good teams previously. Is just kind of struggling a little bit here and there, dropping games that they maybe shouldn't, and maybe not fighting against the top quality competition as much as they should be able to.
Yeah, the record's definitely a little worrisome, especially from a mid-major like Coastal. There, you'd like to see them take care of more of those games, and like you mentioned, dropping the midweeks to Clemson and then Wake Forest the week before that, and neither games were close whatsoever. And so it's a midweek, but at the same time, you'd like to see them be a little more competitive when they're playing that upper echelon of competition in those games.
Yeah, mid majors really have to capitalize on those midweeks as much as they can to show that success and prove that they're a good team there. But following them at number 12 is East Carolina. Went 4-0. A good week. They've been pretty good for a few weeks now. And yeah, just should continue to keep rising up. One of the best mid majors there is right now.
Yeah, just continuing to take care of business here. They looked a little sketchy the last couple of weeks, but this is a good sweep here. Hopefully, getting back on track. I think it's a very talented team and likely in the hosting conversation. So we'll see if they're able to close things out the right way.
Yep, 13. We have Virginia jumping up 1 spot, I believe, and able to bounce back from a few weeks ago and pretty much dominate a sorry Louisville team that's just been struggling so much recently, and just capitalizing on that is major for them to continue to succeed.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest question marks right now in the entire country is what in the world has happened to Louisville. Just the wheels have completely fallen off. They've gone from a top 10 team to not even in consideration to make the tournament F's there. I think they have like a 33 win percentage in conference. It's terrible right now, but Virginia just takes advantage, sweeps them, and moves up the rankings just a tad.
Yep, and after Virginia, we have Miami at 14, another ACC team. Good week, one competitive weekend at Pitt. Even though Pitt's maybe not the best team, it's still an away series. So, did their job there. Went 3-1, so can't really complain. And they've been really consistent over the past like half of the season. They've just been definitely one of the top teams in the ACC.
Yeah, it's nice to see Miami just continue to win these competitive series, even if it's against a team that's not as highly noted in Pitt, but it's on the road and it was a tough series. So always good to come out on top, even when you have those competitive series.
Yeah, for sure. And then at 15, we have South Carolina. This is where we just decided to drop them. It's kind of hard to figure out where exactly to put them just because their record's really good, but recently they just haven't had any consistency whatsoever with three straight weekend series losses. So you could really keep them right outside the top 10 or drop them into like the 20 spot. Really, any of those spots seem viable, but yeah, they just have been really struggling. Lost at Arkansas the past week and also lost the midweek, so that's just another brutal loss there, just racking them up slowly but surely up to 14 now. So still not a ton, but just consistency has not been there recently.
Yeah, I think this is a top 10 team and talent wise, and their record kind of reflects that as well. But when you lose three series in a row, you just have to drop. You can't really be in the top 10 or knocking on the door, really. It's tough to lose three series in a row, even if it's against good competition, and that's why you see them dropping a significant amount here.
Yeah, definitely. And then at 16 is where we kept Oregon State. Unfortunately, they didn't have like a place to move up here that we thought was reasonable. They had a good week, 3-1, won their midweek at versus Portland, and then went to UCLA and won that series. So definitely one of the top teams in the Pac-12 now. They've really just proven that over the past few weeks, and just the consistency that they've been able to pull off has been really impressive. And yeah, definitely one of the top teams there.
Yeah, definitely proven themselves to be in that upper echelon of the Pac 12 and putting themselves in decent consideration for a hosting spot if their RPI is able to improve potentially in that conference tourney if they're able to win a couple games. But yeah, putting together a pretty impressive season after having just a so so start to the year.
Yep, and then following them, pretty similar situation for Tennessee where they had a good week but just no real opportunity to rise. They went 3-1 and won versus Kentucky, so really good series win on the weekend and showing that they can beat good teams, especially at home. That's kind of where they've been able to beat teams on the road. They've been a completely different team, but at home they're pretty dominant for the most part. So staying at that 17 spot for now.
Yeah, they face South Carolina this week, and I think that's a huge series. You're going to want to see them win that and win a couple games in Hoover in the conference tourney as well to get themselves into hosting position. Because, like you said, if not, they have just been absolutely miserable on the road, and it's hard to see them being a team that competes to win a regional if it's not at their home park.
Yeah, definitely. And then at 18, we have a somewhat surprising drop for UConn after going 3-1 on the week, but really should have expected the team to go 4-0 there, losing one game versus Butler, who is a just absolutely abysmal team, and they really almost could have lost a few of those games. A lot of them were really close on the week, and yeah, just not what you want to see out of a team that was in hosting consideration and probably not anymore because the RPI does take a hit from losing just one game to a team like that.
Yeah, it's hard to drop a team on a 3-1 week, but I think Butler has about 10 wins on the season, and UConn, the two wins they had were by one run, and then they dropped the last game as well. It's just not exactly what you want to see from a team like that. You expect UConn to do what they've done this whole year and just take care of business against these lower end opponents, but having a slip up like this, hard to say that when it's a 3-1 week, but it's just not the performance you're looking for from them.
Yep. And then at 19, we have Oklahoma State 2-1 on the week, and yeah, that was a win versus Kansas State. So good weekend. Didn't have any midweeks there, but yeah, they have a pretty decent opponent in K State, and yeah, just took that for what it is, and be able to win that and able to rise a few spots from where they were last week at 21.
Yeah, just a good series win, decent Kansas State team, and just taking care of business. They're in the upper end of the Big 12, but the Big 12 has just kind of been an absolute mess this year, besides West Virginia at this point. So hard to say exactly where these teams stack up necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. It's should be interesting to see how many teams end up hosting out of the Big 12, with West Virginia really the only team that should be vying for a spot there. But yeah, after that, we have Dallas Baptist at 20, rising 5 spots from last week. Just an absolutely amazing week, up to 40 wins now as well. And yeah, able to sweep a very good UTSA team who was probably in that like 26 spot last week and has been just outside the top 25 for a few weeks now. So being able to get that is insanely impressive, especially with it being on the road. So yeah, deserve to jump up a few spots over teams that didn't do super well or just, had okay weeks.
Yeah, just a super impressive week from DBU. And like you said, hitting that 40 win mark is very impressive, even if you've come to expect it from a program like them in a mid major conference. But it's impressive nonetheless. And against a UTSA team that we thought highly of heading into that week, but impressive for them to get the sweep over them.
Yep. And then at 21, we have Kentucky dropping back a few spots. They went 2-2 on the week, winning their midweek and then losing at Tennessee. So kind of what you expected. They dominated the third game, so that was good to see. But yeah, just could have really put something together there.
Yeah, 2-2 week, like you said, it's kind of what you expect, but at the same time, they had just lost so many series in a row before this last series when they had the previous week.
Yeah.
So it's just tough to follow it up with another series loss. And so hopefully they're able to get things clicking again at the end of this year. But yeah, it's tough. It's what you expect, but it's not what you want if you're a Kentucky fan.
Yeah, the consistency just hasn't been amazing from that perspective recently. But following that, we have Boston College at 22, staying in the same spot. They went 2-0 on their weekend versus Villanova, so really just what you expect. It was a very bad opponent, so can't really move them up or down for just being consistent 2-0 and just getting the job done there.
Yeah, just taking care of business. Boston College, a team that's kind of seemed to just kind of fade in our rankings after their super hot start. I feel like they've quietly just been moving down a bit, but still a solid team and just took care of business this past week.
Yeah, there are definitely more consistent teams recently in the ACC that have proven themselves to be top contenders, while Boston College has definitely fallen off a bit from where they started. But at 23 and 24, we have some new teams jumping in. At 23, we have Indiana State, a team that's just been on a tear recently. They definitely should be ranked now, and yeah, they've just been on the outside for a while, and we've been mentioning them pretty much every week for a while. And yeah, just have 2 losses since the start of April, and their RPI kind of shows that at 14 somehow with what they've been able to do.
Yeah, just a team that's won a ton of games and taken care of business on the road, especially, which is very impressive to do in college baseball. It's hard to win on the road, but they've done that at a good mark and yeah, deserve to hop in the rankings here eventually. Just a team that's been on the outside looking in the last couple of weeks for us.
Yep, and then similarly with Southern Miss at 24, have looked really good recently. And yeah, even though they have been facing kind of lesser teams as of recent, they've just been getting the job done, and finally a spot has been able to open up for them to jump in there. And yeah, they're definitely one of the better mid-major teams this year.
Another one of those teams that we've just had on the outside looking in recently. I thought when they got a crack to jump in the rankings, we'd have them jumping over DBU as well, since they have that sweep over them. But with DBU sweeping UTSA this past week, it's hard to really for them to make that sort of jump. So DBU moving up and Southern Miss just clicking in here at the end.
Yep, and then finally in our 25 spot, we're leaving Maryland in the rankings, dropping down a few spots from last week. They went 2-2, an okay week, but losing their midweek to Northeastern, doesn't hurt the most just because Northeastern has been pretty consistent, a pretty good mid-major team. And then winning the weekend series, can't really complain there, even if it is against a iffy, Minnesota team. But yeah, I think just staying inside the top 25 for now is where they should be, with a few teams right on the edge of the top 25.
Yeah, not a terrible week at 2-2, but it was rough for the RPI. Kind of sitting at a fringe RPI team right now, but as the class of the Big Ten, we still expect them to be in the tournament regardless for the most part, unless these next 2 weeks go terribly. So hanging on here in the rankings.
Yeah, and then some teams right outside the top 25 to mention. I think primarily for me, it goes to Washington. They're a team that's literally just on the outside, pretty much coming from out of nowhere, what seems like. But the past few weeks, they've just been insanely hot, winning 9 of 10 and now in second place or tied for second in the Pac 12. So really turned it on lately and have been a really good team and just swept Oregon away from home. So really impressive stuff from Washington, and their offense has really picked up recently.
Yeah, back-to-back loud sweeps over USC and then Oregon. Those are two very impressive weekends there. The pack just continues to get shaken up. It feels like week after week. Teams that are on the bubble hop out. Teams that are out just hop in randomly. So it's kind of a mess outside of Stanford and Oregon State at this point. But yeah, Washington right on the fringe there at 26. Another team I have right on the outside looking in at this point is Texas. Been a team that's just kind of inconsistent to start the year, but they've really started to put it together on this back half of conference play, and their overall record is one that reflects a top 25 team at this point, and I think they're a team right outside looking to hop in here soon.
Yep, definitely. A few other teams that are around there, probably Indiana. They've been pretty consistent. They had a rough week a few weeks ago, but they're back on that train, and right outside the top 25 there, we also got North Carolina. Also has been outside the top 25 for a while, but has finally showed some consistency, winning back-to-back good weekends. So, yeah, close to being ranked now. And similarly, Alabama, a team that was right outside the top 25 for a lot of the year, then dropped a little bit further back. But once their coach got fired, it seems like that lit a spark under them, and now they mean business. So, yeah, they've just been closing that gap to being ranked pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't think I have many others outside of here besides the ones you mentioned, but Alabama, especially a cool one to mention. Just with the scandal going on, it's been cool to see them play well these past few weekends and put themselves in contention to finish well in the SEC. And if things go well this last weekend in the conference tourney, could actually be a fringe host potentially. So really cool to see them finish the season strong, even going through their troubles.
Yep, definitely. And now we can run down the top 25 once more time. This is week 13 of college baseball rankings. Maryland at 25, then Southern Miss, Indiana State, Boston College, Kentucky, Dallas Baptist at 20, Oklahoma State, UConn, Tennessee, Oregon State, South Carolina at 15, Miami, Virginia, East Carolina, Coastal Carolina, Duke at 10, Clemson 9, Vanderbilt 8, Campbell 7, West Virginia 6, LSU 5, Florida 4, Stanford 3, Arkansas 2, and Wake Forest in that number 1 spot.